Hello, welcome to Issues and Ideas. I'm Chris DeBello. This past week, Senate and House Democrats held what's called a shadow hearing, focusing on the actions of ICE in Minnesota, which, of course, Republicans didn't attend. The fact is, Republicans couldn't attend because there is no rational way of defending the actions of ICE, which includes, of course, the killing of 2 U.S. citizens. Those deaths of Alex Pretti and Rene, Nicole. Those aren't the only horrors, by the way, perpetrated by ICE. There were numerous witnesses who shared the absolute torture that they endured at the hands of ICE. Here's the testimony from Aliyah Rahman.
Thank you, members, for taking time to be here today, and thank you, staff, for making this happen. My name is Aliyah Rahman, and I am a resident of South Minneapolis. I'm a Bangladeshi American, born in northern Wisconsin, and I'm a disabled person with autism and a traumatic brain injury. Not all autistic brains do this, but mine fixates on sounds, numbers, and patterns. And while what the world saw happen to me exactly 3 weeks ago today on video was a terrible violation, it is still nothing compared to the horrific practices I saw inside the Whipple Center. So I am here today with a duty to the people who have not had the privilege of coming home, and I offer this data because these practices must end now. On January 13th, on the way to my 39th appointment at Hennepin County's Traumatic Brain Injury Center, I encountered a traffic jam caused by ICE vehicles and no signs indicating how to get around it. I had not wanted to pull into a blocked, chaotic intersection, but verbally agreed to do so and rolled down my window after an agent yelled, "Move! I will break your effing window!" His first instruction. Agents on all sides of my vehicle yelled conflicting threats and instructions that I could not process while watching for pedestrians. Then the glass of the passenger side window flew across my face. I yelled, "I'm disabled," at the hands grabbing at me, and an agent said, "Too late." I felt immersed in a pattern, and I thought of Genoa Donald, an autistic black man killed by police during a traffic stop in 2021. I remembered Mr. Sliberio Gonzalez, who was killed by ICE in his vehicle last year. An agent pulled a large combat knife in front of my face, which I thought was for cutting me, and later learned was used to cut off my seatbelt. Shooting pain went through my head, neck, and wrists when I hit the ground face first, and people leaned on my back. I felt the pattern, and I thought of Mr. George Floyd, who was killed 4 blocks away. I was carried face down through the street by my cuffed arms and legs while yelling that I had a brain injury and was disabled. I now cannot lift my arms normally. I was never asked for ID, never told I was under arrest, never read my rights, and never charged with a crime. Approaching the Whipple Center, I saw black and brown bodies shackled together, chained together, being marched by yelling agents outdoors. I continue to hear the word bodies because that is how agents refer to us. We're bringing in a body. They're bringing in bodies, 7, 8 at a time. Where do I put them? We can't use that room. There's already a body in there. You have no reason to believe you will make it out alive if you are already being called a body. Agents repeatedly had to stop and ask how to do tasks. I received no medical screening, phone call, or access to a lawyer. I was denied a communication navigator when my speech began to slur. Agents laughed as I tried to immobilize my own neck. I asked for my cane and was told no, pulled up my arms and prodded forward in leg irons by agents laughing and saying, "Walk, you can do it, walk." Agents did not know if the facility had a wheelchair. When I was finally placed in one to be taken to interrogation, an agent taunted, "You were driving, right? So your legs do work." I pleaded for emergency medical care for over an hour after my vision had become blurry, my heart rate went through the roof, and the pain in my neck and head became unbearable. It was denied. When I became unable to speak, my cellmate pleaded for me. The last sounds I remember before I blacked out on the cell floor were my cellmate banging on the door, pleading for a medic, and a voice outside saying, "We don't want to step on ICE's toes." When I opened my eyes at Hennepin County's emergency room, I learned I was brought there to be treated for assault. The impacts of DHS detention on my physical, mental, and financial well-being and safety have been very severe, but I do not deserve more humane treatment than anyone else, U.S. citizen or not. And I am here today with a strong spirit and a duty to the many people who haven't had the privilege to tell their stories or see their loved ones come home. I am extremely distressed by the pattern that violence from law enforcement has been happening to Black and Indigenous communities for centuries, and to DHS survivors for over 20 years. We call ourselves a civilized nation, but we lack rules and accountability around what a person claiming to be law enforcement is permitted to do to another human being. I am not afraid, and I'm not afraid to keep working on this problem even after ICE is gone. Thank you for your time.
No, this is not America. But thanks to Donald Trump and others, it's what America is becoming. It's an America where when people hear Ms. Rahman express her pain and her fear, they laugh. They actually freaking laugh. I've seen people, just because she has a Hispanic name and brown skin, question whether she's here legally. These scum actually do serve a purpose, by the way, which later on in the show I'll reveal what that purpose is. We also had Representative Robert Garcia reveal some of the torment that another witness, Miramar Martinez, suffered through from these fat slobs of ICE. Let's go back and listen to that from Representative Garcia.
We know that they're calling some of you and Americans across this country terrorists and anarchists. And I want to be clear that President Trump and his administration continue to lie about what they're doing over and over again. I want to start with Ms. Martinez. You shared a heartbreaking story, and I just want to go over some information on the record again to be very clear. You were shot 5 times, which is terrifying and horrific. Your own government called you a domestic terrorist, is that correct?
Correct.
And you're not a terrorist, of course, correct?
No, I'm not.
You're a teacher, is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, correct.
You were convicted of no crimes, is that correct?
Correct.
Have you ever been convicted of a crime?
Never.
Never been convicted of a crime. But the government kept calling you a domestic terrorist even after all the baseless criminal charges against you were dismissed, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Would you agree that the government is trying to intimidate protesters and to encourage more violence?
Yes.
Is it true that in the body cam footage, the CBP officer told you to, and I'm so sorry for saying this, the officer told you to, quote, do something, bitch, before he fired?
Yes.
It's disgusting, shameful, and it gets worse. Ms. Martinez, these are images of texts sent by the agent who shot you. And they're actually disturbing to read, but I think it's important for the public to see this. The agent linked an article about your shooting and texted, read it. 5 shots, 7 holes. I fired 5 rounds and she had 7 holes. Put that in your book, boys. Oh, well, it is what it is. It happens. This is someone that works for the United States government. I fired 5 rounds and she had 7 holes. Now, he was talking about you And it's our understanding that he was actually bragging about his aim, shooting an unarmed American citizen. Is that right?
Correct.
I'm so sorry, Ms. Martinez. DHS has allowed the agent who shot you to remove evidence and to potentially destroy it. Is that correct?
Correct.
They are actively working to deny you justice to an American citizen who's been shot and almost murdered. I'm so sorry.
All that we've seen and continue to see unfold, again, is not what America was designed or ordained to be. Even more dire is that if this is allowed to continue, then America, as envisioned by our founders, will, without question, cease to be. Scroll through social media, and you will quickly find very strong opinions about the actions of ICE, and there's really no middle ground. Quite frankly, these voices are either very supportive or very against what ICE is doing. Now, those pro-ICE voices took a strange turn in the aftermath of the homicide of Alex Pretti in order to justify ICE. The Second Amendment, more specifically, right to carry, came under attack by these voices. And these voices didn't just include American citizens, elected leaders from DA offices to Congress to even the White House joined in. My first guest today is with us to take a look at the implications of all this. He's a spokesperson with Gun Owners of America, author of the book, A Town Called Sutherland Springs, Faith and Heroism Through Tragedy, which presents a story of how he responded to a 2017 church shooting. Stephen Willeford, how are you today, Stephen?
I am doing superb.
And two websites for you listening. We have them at our homepage as well. Learn more about Gun Owners of America, gunowners.org, and Stephen's website, thebarefootdefender.com. Let us go back. I'll start at the lower level and move up the ladder a bit. We had a federal prosecutor in Los Angeles say on his X account, if you approach law enforcement with a gun, there is a high likelihood they will be legally justified in shooting you. Don't do it. Want to go up the chain a little bit? We have Kash Patel, FBI director, claiming that carrying a firearm at a protest is illegal. You can't bring a firearm to any sort of protest. We had, Janine Pirro, D.C. DA, basically saying don't bring guns into Washington, D.C., and even President Trump stated the protesters can't have guns and criticized Alex Pretti for carrying a very powerful, fully loaded gun, 2 magazines, of which Kristi Noem said Pretti was brandishing. So as a gun proponent, you're hearing all this from people you think are your allies. What are you thinking then?
Well, first off, I think they're wrong. Your First Amendment is protected by your Second Amendment. Your right to peacefully protest, and now that's important, peacefully protest.
Right.
I have been at protests before here in Texas. I have been with an AR-15 on my chest and a CZ-75 on my side. Open carry, both of them. Peaceful protest, never blocked or tried to brandish, if you want, a firearm to a law enforcement officer, never tried to impede on what they were doing. And there's a very distinct difference, there. And did I have loaded spare magazines? The answer would be yes. I did. Your Second Amendment and your First Amendment work hand in hand. However, you do have to be peaceful. You cannot be threatening. You have to obey law enforcement instructions, and that's just life.
No, to be sure. And I think what people need to understand, too, someone who's attained a right to carry permit, this isn't a gun-happy person who got a gun off the street and is carrying around. You have to go through, especially here in New Jersey, for example, you need to have an actual threat against you before you can even be considered for a right to carry permit. And there are a few of the other states out of the 29 that allow right to carry that are at a similar level.
Are you in New Jersey?
Yes, we are.
I am really sorry because because your Second Amendment does not apply to you, and I think we're fighting to straighten that out. Please go to gunowners.org and sign up, get in the fight. But yes, we're trying to straighten it out. New Jersey is one of the worst. Sorry. So in the state of Texas, we don't even need a permit. As a matter of fact, in the state of Texas, our state capitol, I walked on the Senate floor with a pistol on my side. That is the people's house. We own that capitol, and we have the right to carry in it. And you never hear of a violent issue that happens in our capitol. Why? Because everybody that carries on the state capitol is carrying because we respect our Second Amendment.
And we should add, too, because you mentioned how the First and Second Amendments are interconnected. Second Amendment is also boosted and further protected with the 14th Amendment.
Well, absolutely. All our so people don't understand our amendments or our Bill of Rights. And a Bill of Rights isn't the government granting us any rights. Instead, most people don't even understand this, but the Bill of Rights isn't the government granting rights. It is the government recognizing that these are God-given rights and restricts the government from impeding on God-given rights. The right for free speech, the right for freedom of religion, the right to gather and assemble. That's part of protest.
Absolutely.
Peaceful protesting. Now, peaceful protesting is what that means. And to address grievances against our government, that's all part of the First Amendment, is freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of, and then the Second Amendment protects the First Amendment and all the other amendments, which is called the Bill of Rights. These were understood as God-given rights. And they are not granting us anything. They are making sure the government can't impede on our Bill of Rights. It's restricting the government, not granting us.
That was talking with Stephen Willeford, spokesperson for Gun Owners of America, author of the book, A Town Called Sutherland Springs, Faith and Heroism Through Tragedy, gunowners.org, thebarefootdefender.com. And you're listening to Issues and Ideas. The whole idea for the Bill of Rights came about, too, Stephen, because the Anti-Federalists back at the Constitutional Convention saw that the Constitution that divvied up the government, the judicial, legislative, executive branch, that was going to be the beginning, the middle, the end. And they said, whoa, wait a minute, now we got some more work to do here. And so came the Bill of Rights with the Second Amendment specifically, crafted by James Madison. So, thank God for the Anti-Federalists. Otherwise, we would have been starting this nation with a lot less than we needed to survive this long.
Boy, I'm really glad you brought up the Anti-Federalist Papers. So, and schools don't teach it. Schools don't teach it. And how do they not teach it? Because if we don't know where we came from and what the disagreements and the agreements were with Federalists and Anti-Federalists didn't want a powerful federal government. They wanted each state to be its own autonomous, and the Federalist Papers wanted a stronger federal government. So there had to be a balance between the two. And essentially what they came up with was our Constitution. And the Constitution lays out very plainly the powers of the state and the powers of the federal government. And the powers of the federal government set up the parameters for the Bill of Rights, meaning the states all had to agree to the Bill of Rights, which is First Amendment, Second Amendment. All the states had to agree with that. And then if it wasn't encompassed in that, then essentially the state had the right to make its own rules about certain things. And that's why Roe versus Wade, when it went away, it didn't ban abortion altogether. It gave the states the right to decide whether abortion should happen or not. because the state needs to decide for itself all these other issues that is not encompassed in the Bill of Rights.
The basic rule of thumb for anyone who doesn't really study the Constitution, if it's not mentioned in the Constitution, it's not a federal right. It's up to the state, and abortion being a prime example of that, along with many other key issues that, unfortunately, this administration, even the one before it, were trying to capture and kidnap for the federal government when it's not it's not constitutionally right for a federal government to either take action away from the state or take action from one branch of the government into the other.
Now, the only true power the federal government has over the states, other than the Constitution, other than the Bill of Rights, is interstate commerce, meaning trade between the states. If I make a widget here in Texas, New Jersey said, oh, your widget should be illegal here, I can't just sell my widget in New Jersey because y'all have the right to decide whether my widget is legal or not, except for firearms because that's part of the Bill of Rights. And when New Jersey passes a law, and I know you have this, where all hollow point ammunition is automatic 10 years in prison with no parole, that's illegal. And I truly believe it's illegal. I walk down the street with 2 extra magazines holding 15 rounds apiece in my pocket, one in my pistol that holds 15 rounds, and one in the chamber that holds, an extra round. So I never get out of prison in New Jersey. I mean, you guys need to go and sign up for Gun Owners of America, find out what your state really requires and what it does and how it's breaking the Constitution, and be part of the solution and start winning your state back. Because we're going to get national reciprocity passed, and when we get national reciprocity passed, then Texas will have to adhere to Texas law when it comes to firearms, and we will be restricted only by Texas law when we visit your state.
That happened once before here, too. Someone in Philadelphia was traveling into New Jersey. She had her weapon secured in her trunk, not even touching it, stopped at a gas station, and one thing led to another with interaction with the police, and they searched, found the gun. She wound up going to prison. Then Governor Christie actually had to parole her because the reciprocity rule was non-existent. So she was a legal carrying, abided by every possible safety measure, and because of the lack of the laws that you're referring to, she still wound up in prison, albeit for a short time.
Well, we are fighting, Gun Owners of America are fighting for national reciprocity. And what it means is no matter where we travel in this country, all 50 states, we will have to adhere to the laws of the state in which we're from.
That's
so
exactly
if I
it
go
should
into New Jersey, I can carry without a permit with a 32-round Glock magazine sticking out of my pistol, carrying open, and there's nothing that New Jersey could do about it.
And find out more about Gun Owners of America, this issue, along with all aspects of respectful, legal, responsible gun ownership. You find it at gunowners.org. And while you're doing your web surfing, thebarefootdefender.com is you can find out more about, we hear the phrase before, a good guy with a gun and what they can do. Well, that's Stephen's story with the 2017 shooting at a church. That's why the book is called A Town Called Sutherland Springs, Faith and Heroism Through Tragedy. Stephen, you bring the sanity to put down the political rhetoric, and that gets the person listening who needs the knowledge to the truth. So I thank you for doing that, for being here today.
Well, thank you very much. And just so your listening audience knows, I ran across the street, confronted a mass shooter, and took him out with my own rifle.
And you find out more in Stephen's book. Thanks again, Stephen.
Thank you, and God bless.
If you're listening to Issues and Ideas via your favorite podcast platform, don't forget to subscribe. This past Monday, Donald Trump said this while appearing on the Dan Bongino Show.
These people were brought to our country to vote. and they vote illegally. And amazing that the Republicans aren't tougher on it. The Republicans should say, we want to take over. We should take over the voting in at least 15 places. The Republicans ought to nationalize the voting. And we have states that are so crooked, and they're counting votes. We have states that I won that show I didn't win. Now you're going to see something in Georgia where they were able to get, with a court order, the ballots. You're going to see some interesting things come out. But, like the 2020 election, I won that election by so much. Everybody does it.
Yes, you heard that right. Donald Trump wants the federal government to take over the elections. One little tiny itsy-bitsy problem with that idea. It's called the U.S. Constitution. Reading here from Article 1, Section 4, the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof, but the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations except as to the places of choosing senators. Constitutional scholars have long said that the Constitution's election clause allows Congress to have oversight in how states run and oversee elections, but it does not allow the federal executive or legislative branches to take running elections away from the state. And that includes, by the way, getting ahead of what might be the inevitable an executive order. Next day, White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt tried to save Trump from himself, as many have tried to do in the past. Here's what she said.
What does President Trump mean when he says Republicans ought to nationalize voting? What does that look like in practice?
What the president was referring to is the SAVE Act, which is a huge common sense piece of legislation that Republicans have supported, that President Trump is committed to signing into law during his term. And he spoke with the speaker directly about that yesterday, about the need to get that bill on the floor for a vote, because it provides very common sense measures for voting in our country, such as voter ID. I don't think any rational person who's being honest with themselves would disagree with the idea of requiring citizens of this country to present an ID before casting a ballot in a federal election, or frankly in any election. And that's something the president wants to see happen. So that's what he was referring to.
But to be clear, he does believe the state should oversee it.
The president believes in the United States Constitution. However, he believes there has obviously been a lot of fraud and irregularities that have taken place in American elections. And again, voter ID is a highly popular and common sense policy that the president wants to pursue, and he wants to pass legislation to make that happen for all states across the country.
And Kelly, just to follow up on that, he said specifically that they should take over elections in 15 states. Can you tell us what he meant by that, what 15 states he's referring to in terms of Republicans taking over elections?
Again, what I was just telling you is that with the passage of the SAVE Act, voter ID will be implemented across all 50 states. The president was referring to specific states in which we have seen a high degree of fraud. If you look at states like California, or if you look at New York City, for example, non-citizens are allowed to vote in elections in places like California and New York City. That just creates a system, an electoral system, that is absolutely ripe with fraud.
You heard her reference the SAVE Act. That's a piece of legislation that's addressing elections with valid ideas, including voter ID. But her try for the save was all for naught, because on Wednesday, Trump said this.
Thank you for taking our questions. What exactly did you mean when you said that you should nationalize elections, and which 15 states are you talking about?
I want to see elections be honest, and if a state can't run an election, I think the people behind me should do something about it. Because, if you think about it, a state is an agent for the federal government in elections. I don't know why the federal government doesn't do them anyway. But when you see some of these states about how horribly they run their elections, what a disgrace it is, I think the federal government, when you see crooked elections, and we had plenty of them, and by the way, we had them last time, but go to 2020 and look at the facts that are coming out. Rigged, crooked elections. If we have areas, take a look at Detroit, take a look at Pennsylvania, take a look at Philadelphia, you go take a look at Atlanta, look at some of the places that horrible corruption on elections, and the federal government should not allow that. The federal government should get involved. These are agents of the federal government to count the votes. If they can't count the votes legally and honestly, then somebody else should take over.
But the Constitution says it should be states that administer elections, Mr. President. That's what the Constitution
You know what?
says.
They can administer the election, but they have to do it honestly.
Now, you might be brushing all this off by saying, it's just Trump being Trump. He doesn't really mean it. Really? Then explain to me why he had his puppet seize the original rather than copies of the 2020 election ballots from Fulton County, Georgia, if he's not serious about any of this. It has become more obvious and clear that there is a serious degree of extremist beliefs here in America. And while it had been what's called loosely organized in an attempt to keep it hidden in the dark, we've seen extremism become much more organized and bold, stepping into the light in recent years. So what's brought about this new boldness among extremists? Well, maybe it's who they see as supporting them. At least that's who they believe is supporting them. According to my next guest, that would be people ranging from the White House to various departments of our government. Joining us to discuss how this is all unfolding is a professor of sociology at Chapman University who studied extremism for more than 25 years. He's also co-author of the books American Swastika, Inside the White Power Movement's Hidden Spaces of Hate, and Out of Hiding, Extremist White Supremacy and How It Can Be Stopped. Professor Peter Simi, how are you today, Professor?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate you bringing the reality into the light because, and we'll get into this too, we always think of extremists, racist, bigots, whatever you want to tag them as being stupid, but when you look at their means and their methods they've plotted and planned a very smart way, and we'll get into that. Chapman.edu is a website for Chapman University. Find out their educational opportunities there. But just as a baseline for the person listening, define extremism.
Well, easier said than done.
Yes.
In many respects. It's one of those, a lot of different definitions, been kind of argued for years and years about exactly how to define it. I think there's some key elements, though, that we can agree on. One is the use of political violence to achieve your goals. So that kind of separates folks that are working within the conventional means in terms of trying to achieve their political goals through legal means versus those who are willing to use violence to achieve their goals. Another factor is kind of support for kind of democratic ethos in terms of following kind of constitutional order versus more authoritarian methods, working outside of a constitutional system or seeing a constitutional system as kind of a constraint on being able to do what you want. So kind of an anti-democratic ethos and the use of violence, I would say, are two key elements, although it is a pretty complex kind of concept to define, and we can certainly get into other elements as well, but I would say those are two key ones.
Now, what's being perpetrated at a greater rate and pace, I've looked at various your writings along with others. If someone doesn't understand the root of what's being shared in these posts, are they going to understand how toxic these posts and these social media communications are that we're referring to?
No, not necessarily. And of course, that's part of the goal with a lot of this type of propaganda is it can speak to different segments of the public in different kinds of ways. It can appeal to folks in the know who really do kind of get the more subtle aspects of it, the more hidden aspects of it. It can still transmit a message, though, in a more overt way and appeal to other folks just on more base aspects in terms of maybe communicating certain kinds of fears that are more widely felt or experienced throughout the public, but then still have these other subtle kind of innuendo type of aspects to the message that are more hidden, and that would be, again, more folks that are more steeped in the kind of extremist ideology.
If I mention QAnon, which is, well, I've debated this with myself on my social media pages, has QAnon faded away or did they morph into some semblance of MAGA? But that's another talk for another time. But with QAnon gone, for all intents and purposes, at least in the visibility they had, what has risen and how are these poisons, how are these tropes being shared in what at least superficially appears to be an innocuous way, which is even being denied by the people who are posting it?
Yeah, well, and again, that's also part of the game is to put the messages out there, but put them out there in a way that basically provides you with plausible deniability so that you can then deny after the fact, well, it was just a joke, you're taking it more serious than it was meant to, or you're reading into it, you're reaching. It's really kind of a gaslighting strategy that you use with propaganda that's, pretty common in terms of the use of propaganda, is that establishing plausible deniability after the fact. And we see that a lot with the kind of extremism we're discussing. As far as, the QAnon and what's kind of, emerged, I mean, you have just a whole hodgepodge of different elements to kind of far-right extremism today that are circulating in all kinds of different platforms, mainstream social media platforms like Facebook to more fringe platforms like Telegram. But, one of the things that we see now that's certainly pretty striking as compared to, say, 15 years ago is the way in which it's circulating through government channels. And that certainly has been, I think, a real point of distinction that we're seeing government channels operating in ways that bear an eerie resemblance to extremist channels that we've typically associated with more fringe elements of society.
Of the way that Facebook and X, among the two more mainstream social media channels, have cut out their filters and their fact-checking, the fringe platforms aren't even needed anymore.
Well, that's true. That is true. X today is hard to distinguish from some of the darkest corners of Telegram that we've typically associated with, open advocacy of violence and circulation of things like how to make bombs and other kinds of terrorist-related manuals of various sorts. So, yeah, X is a haven for some of the worst kind of vitriol and threats against public officials and other, various other public figures. You see it all right there on X, circulating to millions and millions of people. So, definitely, that's been the case there.
Talking with Professor Peter Simi, who is Professor of Sociology, Chapman University, chapman.edu, their website, and you're listening to Issues and Ideas. The way these posts are structured, and again, if you don't understand the root of what's being said, you're going to fall prey to it. Intentionally or unintentionally, is there a danger of drawing people unknowingly into extremist tropes and converting them into believing them?
Oh, absolutely. And of course, we've seen that happen, with the kind of emergence of computer technology. I mean, even going back to the 1980s and certainly the 90s, when you see the, kind of wide-scale development of the internet and its availability, we saw this starting in a much, kind of smaller scale way, and certainly it's continued to develop as this kind of technology has become much more widely available. And then once you see the emergence of social media and how prevalent that becomes as a form of communication, you see much greater ease of these kind of extremist tropes to, kind of emerge within the mainstream. And for people, in some cases, unknowingly kind of starting to tap into it. And, we can, how unknowing is it? That's a different argument to have, a different discussion to have. But certainly there are a lot of people where the messages are resonating in terms of they're tapping into certain emotions, certain fears and anxieties that they may have. They may not necessarily associate these with neo-Nazism, for example, but in fact the very messages may be actually stemming from various types of neo-Nazi propaganda or organizations and so forth.
That's certainly it's an aspect being used in ICE recruitment. And another example here, this was earlier this month, the Labor Department posted a video with the caption on it, "One homeland, one people, one heritage," which I tend to believe is more than just coincidental that it all but parrots a phrase used by the Nazis during World War II, translating here, one people, one realm, one leader. I mean, for the Labor Department to say as a response, "Oh, come on, guys and girls, get a grip," that's making light of a toxic situation that they're creating.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and again, they're one of many government agencies that we could say this about. So, but again, it's the hallmarks of using that plausible deniability, making slight modifications, but still sending the message, and having this kind of it's a certain kind of emotion and a mood that's being communicated here. And really what it comes down to is right now we have a government administration that's trying to convince the American public that they face a variety of existential threats, namely, and most kind of specifically, existential threats related to immigration.
Right.
That these people are trying to take your country, they're trying to take your civilization, they're trying to take your culture. And so they're using these kind of themes and memes and so forth that get at this on some level. And they're really, doubling down, tripling down on the importance of homeland, and that you have a homeland that's under threat. And we're going to save the homeland. We're going to save our people. And of course, this is very much what was done in Nazi Germany and been done elsewhere by various authoritarian regimes, is it trying to convince citizens about an existential threat that they have to overcome, and they have to overcome it with the use of violence, frankly.
Well, Trump had said in the campaign trail, he used the phrase, the immigrants are poisoning the blood of our nation, which all but parrots what Hitler said about the Jews back in leading up to the Holocaust. I mean, they're not even, in many cases, they're not even being clandestine about what they're trying to say. If you have an intermediate idea of history or know how to use AI now, I was going to say Google search, but I'm showing my age when I say that, I guess now. But a simple look of a phrase, well, if you hear a politician repeat something over and over and starts to sour in the taste of it, and you do a AI search of it, I think you might tend to be surprised by what you find is the root of what they're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's not forget what Trump promised us as it relates to mass deportations. He said it at least once, if not multiple times, and it might get ugly. And it might get bloody, excuse me.
Yeah.
I correct myself there. It might get bloody. And it has gotten bloody. And that was something that we when he said it, we should have taken it very seriously and expected that at that point, because he typically will, on some level at least, follow through on some of these kinds of promises of sorts.
Well, for you listening, here's your homework assignment. Do a search for the word remigration. You'll hear it used in the here and now, but find out the history of that word. And the bridge from then to now is going to be one that you hope that we can get rid of, because it's not an idea that we want in what we like to call the land of the free and the home of the brave. And be sure to get Professor Simi's books, too, because with America's Swastika Inside the White Power Movement's Hidden Spaces of Hate, you learn about the roots and the foundations. Then when you go to Out of Hiding Extremist White Supremacy, how it could be stopped, Professor Simi, along with his co-authors, give you ideas and paths to solutions. Doable, realistic, and effective solutions, I might add, too. Find out more about Chapman University at chapman.edu. He is Professor of Sociology, Chapman University, Professor Peter Simi. Professor, thank you for shining a light on the darkness that never wants the light but is in dire need of the light, and thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me. It was nice talking with you.
Over at the Issues and Ideas Facebook page, I've done something I don't normally do. On the post related to Rene, Nicole, Good, and Alex Pretti, I've left many of the hateful comments about these two people murdered by ICE that people wrote. Not all of them. I deleted the worst of the worst, which, well, when you read what I allowed to remain, will probably chill you as you think of what could have been worse. Anyway, also regarding Alex Pretti, there are still people who buy into the lie that photo of that flamboyant cross-dresser, whose real name is Kyle Wagner, by the way, is actually Alex Pretti, despite being told in great detail of how they're wrong. That kind of reveals how way too many people are more willing to believe a lie told with a photo and 3 words versus the truth when it's explained to them with 1,000 words. These are the lost souls who Jesus addresses in John chapter 3, verse 12, when he says, "If I have told you earthly things and you do not believe, how will you believe if I tell you heavenly things?" God in the book of Jeremiah is instructing Jeremiah on the importance of obedience to his word of truth and the cost of being stubborn. Let's go to Jeremiah chapter 7, verses 23 and 24, where God says, "But this is what I command them, saying, Obey my voice, and I will be your God, and you shall be my people, and walk in all the ways that I've commanded you, that it may be well with you. Yet they did not obey or incline their ear, but followed the counsels and the dictates of their evil hearts, and went backward and not forward." Yet these people who lash out at others that they are in disagreement with, they do it with anger, hostility, hate, obscenities, and in their very next breath declare themselves to be Christians, evangelicals, as they clutch their Bible. Some even proudly display their Trump Bible. All this self-branding makes them believe that they have the authority of God with them and work to make others believe the same. John in 1 John chapter 3, verses 7 through 9 gives us this warning: "Little children, let no one deceive you. He who practices righteousness is righteous, just as he is righteous. He who sins is of the devil, for the devil has sinned from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of God was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil. Whoever has been born of God does not sin, for his seed remains in him, and he cannot sin because he has been born of God." Let's try something here. Imagine that we're approaching one of these hateful, angry, spiteful, obscenity-spewing, self-proclaimed Christians and spring a quiz on them. A simple quiz. We're going to read some Bible quotes, and they just have to tell us who said them. Simple. Let's start with Matthew chapter 19, verse 14. "Let the little children come to me, and do not forbid them, for of such is the kingdom of heaven." We have this from Luke chapter 6, verse 30. "Give to everyone who asks of you, and from him who takes away your goods, do not ask them back." Let's try this one from Matthew chapter 23, verse 12. "And whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted." We have this quote that's found in Mark chapter 9, verse 35. "If anyone desires to be first, he shall be last of all and servant of all." Okay, one more. Turning to Luke chapter 6, verse 35. "But love your enemies, do good and lend, hoping for nothing in return." Now remember, we're imagining giving this quiz of who said these quotes in the Bible to people whose claims of being Christian certainly differ from their acts. So what do you think their answer would be? "Oh, that's woke." Would they say that? Well, the right answer is, those were the words of Jesus. I haven't done this to mock others. My purpose today was to help those who are true children of God understand just how easily and even eager evil people are to reveal the evil that they carry within themselves. This is why Jesus teaches us this in Matthew chapter 12, verse 34. "Brood of vipers, how can you, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks." Can those filled with hate and anger be saved? Of course. But it's not a one-sided process. While through the grace of God we show forgiveness for them, they also have to look within themselves as they turn to what Jesus says in John chapter 7, verse 38. "He who believes in me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart will flow rivers of living water." Denial, stubbornness, that will only lead to a day that Jesus speaks about in Matthew chapter 7, verses 21 through 23. "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, 'Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name?' And then I will declare to them, 'I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness.'" Don't forget to check out our website, issuesandideasradio.com. That's where we have more information about the guests who joined us here on the show today. And if you're checking us out through your favorite podcast platform, make sure you're subscribed, because not only will that remind you to check out every regularly scheduled edition of Issues and Ideas, but we're about to start doing some things during the week as well that I think you will find quite enjoyable, entertaining, and maybe even educational. Starting point for everything is issuesandideasradio.com, and I always appreciate and are grateful for your time and attention. Look forward to being with you right here this time next week for our next edition of Issues and Ideas.